Welcome to Tucker Carlson Today. Comedy is art, and all art is based on the pursuit of the truth. The truer something is, the better it is, the more beautiful it is, and in the case of comedy, the funnier it is. So when truth became illegal several years ago in the United States, comedy died. But in the far recesses of the internet, there was a remnant, a small remainder of people who are committed to telling the truth purely because it was funny to do that. And the rest of us have been grateful ever since. We're speaking, of course, of the Babylon Bee, one of the last readouts of comedy in the United States. Seth Dillon is the CEO of the Babylon Bee, and we are grateful to be joined by him now. Seth Dillon.
Great to be here.
Thank you for everything that you've done. Leaving aside your fight at some personal cost on behalf of free speech, but just for continuing to amuse the rest of us in an honest way, I mean, that is necessary. So just give us, why do you think it's important that comedy exists?
Well, I think for the reason that you gave, speaking truth, right? And this is one of the things that, we get fact-checked all the time, and our jokes are rated false. And the funny thing is, our jokes are some of the few jokes out there right now that still contain a hint of truth to them. They're still rooted in reality.
Well, that's why they're funny, right?
That's why they're funny. You hear, the saying, there's a grain of truth in every joke, or it's funny because it's true.
Yeah.
There's a reason that those are sayings, and the reason is because your joke has to be tethered to the real world. It has to be rooted in reality, or it's not going to be funny. It's not going to land. And I think we're doing that. I think we're making jokes that are based in reality rather than a narrative. We're not promoting a narrative. We are trying to tell the truth with our jokes and hold people in power accountable. And it's exactly the opposite of what they're saying. They say that we're trying to punch down and,
punching down, right?
Take shots at the marginalized and the oppressed. But I think we're punching up. I think we're punching back, if anything else.
Well, can I ask you, so if you're oppressing the already oppressed, how come the oppressed have the power to kick you off the internet? If they're so oppressed, they wouldn't have that power,
That's
right?
That's a good question. That's what I say. If you have the will and the power to punish anybody who makes a joke about you, that's the way of determining who's got the power in a culture,
exactly.
Right? Who can't you criticize? Who can't you joke about? Those are the people that hold the power. And so, I mean, in this case where we got kicked off of Twitter recently, and I'm sure, we'll get into this at some length, but, we're making fun of somebody, a white, male, high-ranking government official was the target of the joke, kind of. I mean, that was the subject of the joke anyway.
Yes.
But in the target of the joke was this idea that, USA Today had named a male person Woman of the Year. And we're joking about this. This is not punching down. This is a white, male, high-ranking government official who's the subject of this joke. And it's an idea that's being pushed on people from the top down. So, the truth in our joke is that men are actually men and women are women, and you can't switch back and forth between them. And that's why the joke actually works, is because it's rooted in reality. So,
well, totally.
Yeah.
I always think, if you've got Citibank and Disney and Facebook and Twitter and the U.S. State Department and the White House on your side,
right?
Whether you're, some oppressed group or Ukraine or whatever, your cause may be right or wrong, but you're not the underdog.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
If everyone with power is on your side, you're not the underdog.
Right. And we're fighting potentially getting deplatformed every step of the way. There's hit pieces in New York Times calling us a far-right misinformation site that traffics in misinformation under the guise of satire. So we're dealing with all of these obstacles to even telling jokes. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fight. I think we're punching up and punching back.
It's what's so interesting about the Babylon Bee. One of the reasons I was so grateful that you came, we had dinner last night, I should say, and I was thankful for that, is that unlike so many other institutions in American life, when all this pressure came down on the Babylon Bee, which I've been reading for several years, probably 4 years, 3 years, you got funnier. You didn't wilt. You didn't do the Jimmy Kimmel where the man comes in and is like, shut up, Jimmy Kimmel. And he's like, okay, I'm now a regime spokesman. You're like, up yours. We're going to be. Am I imagining this, or did you get funnier?
Maybe. I mean, maybe part of it has to do with the fact that the world has become so crazy. Like the jokes, it's outrageous, right? Like it's hard to satirize reality with how absurd that it is right now. And so when we actually get one to go through and actually work, it's there's so much to make fun of right now. There's so much out there that's so insane. And when you read studies about how Stanford students are more likely to wear masks on bicycles than helmets. And that Healthline.com is saying, yes, it's true, men can get pregnant. And you have men dominating women's sports. With this kind of stuff going on, you get CNN reporters standing in front of burning cars saying the situation's mostly peaceful. I mean, in that environment, it's a target-rich environment, yes, but we're having to exaggerate that stuff to make these jokes. When we actually get it to work, I think it's pretty funny. The problem is the jokes end up coming true because reality catches up to us like 10 seconds
later. But did you ever say to yourself, because you own it, I should say. You're the majority owner of the company, and so your livelihood is at stake. And so all of us know what the lines are. Like there's some things you can't make fun of because some groups are so oppressed they'll kill you if you make fun of them.
Right.
Did you ever think to yourself, maybe we should just establish some boundaries where like we leave the sacred cows alone and we just do the Jimmy Kimmel thing and just play it safe?
No way. I mean, well, that's the problem. I think part of the reason why some of these outlets, these comedians, they're becoming so irrelevant is because they are trying to do that dance. They're trying to tiptoe through the minefield and not step on the mine that will blow them up and end their career. They don't want to get canceled. They're afraid of getting canceled. We're not afraid of that. I mean, is it a possibility? Sure. I mean, we're already locked out of Twitter. Facebook could be next. Instagram could be next. We lose all these platforms one by one. But we're doing the job of the comedian. I think the satirist's job is to poke holes in the popular narrative, not promote the popular narrative. So if we're out there doing that, then we're doing our job. And if they want to shut us up and silence us for doing that, I think it exposes them for being frauds. And it only amplifies our voice ultimately, and we'll generate, I think, more support as a result.
But I guess my point is there's real risk. So we have a TV show, and we work for a family that's committed to the First Amendment. So if I get bounced off Twitter, which I did for retweeting you,
right? Thank you. By the way,
never actually tweeted anything in my life, but Emily Lynn, our producer, tweeted it for me.
Well, now we share a Twitter jail cell together. So.
We did. But the point is, we still have a TV show.
Yeah.
So that's our business. Your business is really dependent to some extent on social media, and you're still taking that risk. So that's not a small risk.
No, it's not a small risk. It's a big risk. In fact, it's the big risk factor when we were determining whether or not, when I was thinking, do I want to get involved in the Babylon Bee? Because this is, when I first took over, this was in March of 2018. And it was right around that time when you had Facebook really cracking down. They were being blamed for Trump getting elected, basically. Yeah. And so they were really having to crack down. They were feeling pressure from Congress, from everywhere, from the media, to crack down on the spread of misinformation. And where do you think they looked first? Us. They start fact-checking our jokes. We did a joke about how CNN had purchased an industrial-sized washing machine to spin the news before publishing it. And it gets rated false by Snopes. And Facebook threatens to remove us from making this joke.
So what you're saying is that Snopes determined that CNN didn't actually buy
an industrial-sized washing machine, slap their logo on it, and spin the news inside it before taking it out and publishing it. Didn't really happen. So, but, we're telling jokes like this and getting rated false and getting threatened with deplatforming. This was happening right at the moment when I took it over. And I thought, I might acquire this thing, which is so awesome and it's doing such great work and it's so impactful and it's fun and it's funny. This could be really fun for about 10 days. I don't know how long this is going to last. It's going to get shut down. And fortunately, we've been able to thrive and grow despite some of these obstacles. But it is a real risk. It is a real risk because there may come a time when you can only find our content like on Telegram or, some obscure app that almost nobody uses because one by one they'll topple. So yeah, real risk.
I wonder, there's a risk on the other side, though. So I really admire what you're doing in the face of all of this, but they're taking a risk by doing this. So if you're Snopes or the New York Times and your currency is credibility, people read you because they believe you.
Right.
You're this institution that's been around. And you're fact-checking a comedy site on the basis of, claims CNN has an industrial-sized washing machine. You're beclowning yourself. You've revealed that you're a humorless idiot.
Right.
So how long can that continue?
It seems indefinitely. I don't know. I mean, when the New York Times called us a misinformation site that traffics in misinformation under the guise of satire, this is a verbatim quote, under the guise of satire, they were ridiculed for it. They were mocked for it. And I think that was the appropriate response, was to just mock the hell out of what they were doing and how they were doing it. It deserved it, and they retracted it as a result.
Do you know who wrote that, by the way?
I'm trying to remember the name. It was one of their tech reporters, something Isaac. I don't want to get it wrong.
But you got to wonder how that guy feels. You go home at night and you look in the mirror and you're like, I just spent all day attacking a parody site.
Yeah.
As misinformation. Maybe I've taken a wrong turn, and I'm not saying you should go kill yourself or something, but. Wouldn't you reassess at that point?
You'd think so. But, I think they really see it that way. So what I described a moment ago about how we do satire that's rooted in reality and we're trying to tell jokes that have a grain of truth in them, we're trying to, ultimately, we're trying to speak truth to culture. and confront bad ideas before they can take root, right? I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. But the other side sees it the opposite way. So we'll look at an outfit like The Onion and we'll say, oh, you know, the reason The Onion's not that funny anymore is because their jokes aren't that really rooted in reality. They're rooted in this narrative. They're promoting a narrative. They're trying to get you to believe what their side wants you to believe. And so that undercuts their comedy. Well, they make that argument about us. They say that we are, in fact, promoting a narrative, that it's disingenuous, that it's actually not reality that we're doing. We're riffing. I think it was someone in Slate said that we're riffing on riffs, meaning it's like made up stuff. There's a fabricated narrative that we're using as our truth that we base the joke off of, right? And it comes from, you know, right-wing media and right-wing talking heads.
Okay,
and stuff like that.
but
so they'll accuse us of that and say that that it's a disingenuous effort to try to get people to believe false narratives.
Who's getting banned? Okay, so if you want to know who's over the target, ask yourself who's being censored. Is The Onion being censored? Is The Onion freer to say whatever it wants than the Babylon Bee? And the answer is, of course, no. You read The Onion. You shouldn't even have been permitted to get into the space because The Onion was so dominant that there was no need for the Babylon Bee whatsoever. The Onion was so funny and so good, and like all the really talented kids from Harvard were working there.
Right. They will get fact-checked, too, by the way. The Onion gets fact-checked, but it's funny if you read the fact-checks. Like, Snopes is the one that's, you know, most notorious for fact-checking us. And when they fact-check us, they're like, oh, they've managed to dupe people with their disinformation before. And then
with their damn comedy!
When they fact-check the Onion, it's like, oh, this is The Onion. It's the funniest satire site. You should laugh. This is a joke, you know? And they'll consider it genuine satire. Whereas ours is somehow, you know, satire with a weird bent to it that's political.
But that just means The Onion is bringing an apple for the teacher every day.
Exactly.
I mean, they're sucking up to power and, you know, is this okay, Snopes or New York Times? I mean, like, that's so dishonorable and disgusting. Like, do they hate themselves, do you think?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of them genuinely think they're doing a service to people because they think that, you know, we're spreading bad ideas that people believe. Now, here's the really funny thing is so many people do believe that our jokes are true. It happens. You know, a lot of people believe it. Now, maybe not the CNN spinning the washing machine joke. That one's just so absurd. But when we did a joke and we said that Trump had claimed to have done more for Christianity than Jesus himself, that was believable. Now, that was a joke, you know, on Trump's ego, right? And he says these outlandish things, which he's known to do. That went viral on the left. Like, there were New York Times reporters tweeting that and sharing that because they wanted to believe that was true.
I've spent a lot of time defending Trump. I really like Trump personally. I think he's hilarious and very insightful. But I would have believed that.
Yeah. Well, fast forward. This is the funny thing. So that joke got rated false, right? Snopes rates it false. This was in 2019. In 2021, I think it was in August, Trump called into some radio show on like a Christian radio network and said he had done more for Christianity and even religion in general than any other person in history. So he actually did say it, but he said it in 2021. We made the joke in 2019. It had been rated false.
So you really are in the prophecy business.
We're in the prophecy business. You know, that's what I was saying. You know, we tell these jokes. They're funny when they land, but then you got to hope that reality doesn't catch up to them and fulfill them as prophecies.
Yeah, that's just, again, one of the reasons I'm so happy that you're here, that you exist, because as you see these institutions that you really liked and respected, I was a daily New York Times reader for like 35 years. I read The New Yorker every week, and I love The Onion, and I've never been liberal. But you watch them discredit themselves and then just implode and become parodies of their former selves. And then occasionally you see new institutions arise to take the place that they have evacuated, like your site. Do you know the guys who run The Onion, by the way?
Not personally, no.
Yeah. No. How'd you get into this?
I mean, I was a fan of the Bee. You know, I was following the Bee the way that a lot of people were. It was coming across my timeline, like on Facebook. I would see it in my feed. I would chuckle at the headlines. I didn't always read the articles. I admit I didn't always read the articles. But the joke is in the headlines, so you don't even have to a lot of the time. But yeah, I mean, I was a fan of the site, and I thought, man, this is really refreshing. The first thought that crossed my mind, I think, when I saw a really funny Babylon Bee headline was, I wish I'd written that. I wish I had made this site.
Yes.
Like, who's the guy that's running this website? I got to find this out. So I sought him out. I sought him out. I found out who it was. It's this guy, Adam Ford, genius, by the way. Adam Ford's a genius. He had this comic strip that he was doing, this Christian comic strip. built a little bit of a following, and then he noticed that there was this huge void where nobody was doing satire that was like coming at the issues from a reasonable, conservative Christian worldview at all. He launched the site as a Christian satire site. The tagline was "Your trusted source for Christian news satire." So this was in 2016 when he did that.
I would not have thought, and I'm a Christian, but I don't associate Christianity with a sense of humor, just being honest.
Right.
I would not have thought there was a market for that.
Yeah, well, Adam saw a market for that, and
Yeah.
it was just because oftentimes, the forays into this stuff, the Christian entertainment is sometimes very cheesy, and the comedy's not funny. They try too hard to be clean, So I think he was trying to make a non-cheesy satirical site that looked at the issues a little bit differently from his worldview, his own personal worldview. And it took off like crazy. It went viral. I found out about it shortly after it was launched. And so I just reached out to him and I said, look, what are you trying to do with this thing? Do you want to grow it? Are you looking for investment? Are you trying to sell it? Like, is it even monetized? Is it a business? Is it just a hobby? And he was actually in the middle of working out a deal where he was going to sell it to a media company and exit because he was concerned about censorship, the fact checking that was going on. He was getting dinged all over the place. So he told me he wasn't really interested since he had a deal that was on the table, but that deal fell through and he called me back. So I went and met with him. He lived in Michigan, and went and met with him, and we chatted about it, and it was just a good fit because I wanted to see this thing turn into something. I wanted to give it fuel. I wanted to boost it and have it take off, and just I think that the impact that it could have, bringing comedy to serious issues. Like you have a lot of these issues that if you want to debate them and go back and forth with arguing, they're really like hot button topics, or they're really difficult to address, and it's hard to change somebody's mind. But when you can put it in the context of like humor, like when you do a joke about how a motorcyclist identifies as a bikelist and sets a world record, like you're putting that into a context where you really see the absurdity of it. And that's impactful. I think it's really impactful. So I had an interest in it just because personally I thought it would make a real difference, and it would be fun to be involved. And when we did finally work out some kind of an arrangement, it's since become like the most fun thing I do.
Yeah. I mean, are you still amused by the headlines?
Oh, yeah. And sometimes, I'm not involved in writing all of the headlines. We have a whole team of writers that do that. So I consume the content very passively the way that, a normal reader would. Most of the time, I see it when it goes up on the website oftentimes. I'm not reviewing it before it goes live. And a lot of people ask me about that. They ask me if I have to approve everything that goes up, make sure we don't step in it, or say something that goes across the line or something. But I have a lot of trust in our editor-in-chief, Kyle. He's got really good judgment on that stuff. And
what's his background?
His background, so he was a pastor for a time, but he knows the church inside and out. He's got a church background, but he was working in construction, and he was pitching headlines.
He wasn't at the Harvard Lampoon?
No, no, he was not with the Harvard Lampoon, but he was pitching headlines to Adam when Adam first started the site, just emailing them when he found out that the Babylon Bee had launched. She's like, what is this, news satire? I'll throw some headlines out there. Emailed a few Adam's way, and Adam loved them. He thought they were hysterical. They were great. So he's like, keep it coming, keep more coming. So he was our first hire. He was a part-time hire just submitting headline ideas to
construction
Adam.
guy.
Yeah.
Turned out to be a great comedy writer.
Yeah. And that's where we find them. All of our writers, they do something else. Like these are not, you can't just go out there and say, oh, where are the satire writers?
Yeah.
Like let me hire the satire writers. They don't exist. Like there aren't a lot of jobs where people are just writing satire.
No.
They're engineers, they're software engineers, they're game developers, they're pastors, they're teachers, they're whatever, but they have a knack for it. And so they usually come to us because they're sending us ideas, and we see them, and every now and then they're good, and we connect with somebody on the outside.
What's the process? Like so I email or text an idea to your editor-in-chief, and then is there like a meeting about it, or how does it work?
Well, if you send in ideas unsolicited, usually they're just going to end up in a pile of emails, and they're going to get missed. Every now and then, we notice one of them that looks interesting. But we internally pitch ideas back and forth. We use Slack to talk back and forth, chat with each other. And we just pitch headlines. The joke is in the headline. So you just pitch one headline after another. And the other writers will iterate off of that headline and try to refine it a little bit and get the wording just right. So the publishing process is just a matter of pitching headline ideas after reading the news. We just see what's going on in the world throw ideas back and forth until we land on one that's really funny.
How many are you, like, how many headlines? Is that an editorial meeting right there on the screen? Oh, I thought we just had a picture there. How many, what is that right there we're looking at?
That's in my office. I'm reading from the sacred texts of the Babylon Bee. Obviously, it's a staged photo where I had everyone sit at my feet, like I was,
all the bearded children
teaching
who work for
them.
you.
Yeah, and one of the birthing persons there has her hand raised. She's asking a question. You can see.
That's
yeah,
hilarious. How many headlines are you putting up a day?
It depends. A handful. That's a rough number. I mean, it could be 6, 7, 8. Could be 2. Depends on the day.
Yeah.
We try to put out as many as we can, but it's a little overwhelming if your feed is just saturated with one satirical headline after another. So I think that quality is much better than quantity.
What's the last one that made you laugh?
Oh man, I don't know. They sometimes they really do make me laugh out loud. I mean, the one that really sticks in my mind right now that I've had a lot of my attention focused on is the Rachel Levine identifying, being named Man of the Year by the Babylon Bee and us being kicked off for that. I don't think it was the funniest headline in the world, but it was certainly the one that has, put us in a situation where we're now having to rethink how we do things.
So your headline in response to USA Today's headline was, "This Babylon Bee's Man of the Year is Rachel Levine."
Right. Well, they named Rachel Levine Woman of the Year, right? So we just did a joke where and this is the funny thing, it's like, it is a joke. The Babylon Bee doesn't name anyone Man of the Year or Woman of the Year. That's not what we do. But we did it just to be, in some sense it is to be provocative, because it's to provide a direct response to what you're seeing out there and what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so I knew when we published that one that we might get some heat for that.
But I thought that the point of comedy was to provoke.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be provocative.
It's supposed
correct?
to make you squirm. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. It's supposed to make you laugh. But like, if you go to a comedy show, like, there's going to be times when you're the butt of the joke, and it's a little bit uncomfortable for you. You're having to laugh at yourself.
Yes.
And I think that's a healthy thing, being able to do that. And the fact that so many people now feel like that's out of bounds. Like, there should never be a joke at my expense that makes me feel bad. Why should it make you feel bad? I mean, there are things. Are we perfect? I don't think we're perfect. I think we're all flawed. I think we all do things that are hypocritical at times. I think we all do things that are subject to mockery and scrutiny, and us, throwing it up on the wall and saying, "Am I okay with my own beliefs and behavior?" That's a healthy exercise. So yeah, I think comedy should make you squirm a little bit sometimes. But yeah, people. That's one of the things that people object to is they want this safe space, and they don't want to be made uncomfortable. And comedians who defer to that, it's insane to me that a comedian would try to think to himself, well, how can I avoid offending my audience?
But it's not just comedians. And I say this with sadness, but it's artists of all kinds. I mean, comedians are artists, but it's visual artists, it's actors. I mean, it's architects, it's people who are in the business of creating something beautiful. And that process is predicated on the search for the truth. Beauty doesn't exist without truth. Beauty is truth. They almost all surrendered to the demand that they lie.
Right.
And so the stuff they're producing is just crap.
Right.
Like, when was the last time you read a great novel written in the United States, or saw a building that really moved you, or a painting? Like, it doesn't, or music for that matter. Have you noticed this?
Yeah, and when it loses its essence of truth, it loses its soul, ultimately.
Of course, and it loses its point.
Right.
What's the point? There's no point.
Exactly.
It's not art. These are not artists. They're just apparatchiks. It's all Soviet realism. It's so distressing. That's why, again, I just can't say it enough. Whenever I see it, we had an architect on here a couple months ago who's just slightly deviating from the norm because he believes in beauty, and that guy's a revolutionary, and so are you. So I think people who are committed to truth, even if none of us ever find it, right? But people who at least want to try, find each other. And so maybe that's how Elon Musk wound up doing an interview with you guys. Like, how did that happen?
I was on vacation with my family, so I was in Orlando. And we were out as a family traveling, and I get a message from one of our employees, an assistant producer, and he says, "I'm DMing with Elon Musk right now. Do you want to step in and get involved?" He's like, "I'd like you to get involved." And I'm like, what are you saying to Elon Musk? And he's like, "Well, right now we're talking about the weather." And I'm like, "Why are you talking about the weather?" So I get into the inbox, our Twitter DMs. You know, Elon followed us. He follows like 100-something accounts, and we're one of the accounts he follows. So we have a DM connection with him, where we can go back and forth. Well, we did before we got locked out of Twitter. So our assistant producer just reached out to him out of nowhere with this template that was basically like, "Hi, you know, my name is so and so. We would love to have you come on our show. We could do this remotely or in person. We have an office in California," and it's just this template, you know. And it's not what I would have sent to Elon Musk. I don't think it would have grabbed his attention.
No,
I think it's the kind of thing that he would
letter?
just ignored, like this canned thing. So, but Musk fired back a reply and said, "Why the hell are you in California? LOL." And so it started this conversation. "Oh, well, it's beautiful here. Oh, well, yeah, but it's the most expensive weather in the world." And I'm like, okay, enough talking about the weather. Let's get him on. Let's get him on the show and like actually talk to him. So I told him, I'm like, "Look, we'll leave California if you come on our podcast." And he goes, "Okay, come to Austin and let's do it." So, you know, I then made a joke about how we could get across the country in a Tesla on a single tank of gas, like Biden had said, you know, and he thought that was funny. And so we were just kind of going back and forth, trying to work something out. But he invited us to Austin and said, "Come there in 2 days. I'll meet you. We'll do a sit down." He's a fan of ours. You know, he's engaged with our content quite a bit. If you notice every now and then he'll comment underneath an article, pulling a quote out of he reads the articles. He'll pull quotes out of the articles and then paste them underneath our articles sometimes.
So who is this guy? So Elon Musk, I've never met Elon Musk. I don't know the guy. What's your assessment? Like, who is Elon Musk exactly?
Well, I don't. There's no question that he's brilliant. I think he's really. I think he's a genius, and you know he's trying to solve big problems. He really seems to have genuine concern for humanity, the future of humanity, and wants to take head-on challenges that no one else is willing to take on.
Yeah.
And it's been very interesting. You know, one of the things that I respect about him, and I don't know him super well personally. I mean, I've sat down with him once for an interview, but you know, it's interesting to me, and I think it says a lot that what he's done over the years. You know, he made all this money early on and then dumped that money into these causes that he's promoting, and oftentimes with no view of that actually turning into something profitable. I mean, he almost went bankrupt a couple of times in the companies that he's launched and managed to avoid that. But he was investing his own money in these things and keeping his own equity in these companies to drive them forward. And I respect that a lot. But when it comes to like his involvement with Twitter and everything, it really just comes down to the fact that, you know, politics aside, I don't know really where he lands on the political spectrum. I don't know a lot about his views, but he calls himself a free speech absolutist, and he sees what's going on with, you know, this heavy-handed censorship and the way that it's couched in these terms like misinformation and hate speech. You know, they use these things. They're like euphemisms. They'll say content moderation when what they mean is censorship of views that we don't like. And he sees that for what it is, and he wants to do something about it, and he's willing to put his money where his mouth is. So I think, you know, hats off to him for that.
So wokeness or racism or whatever you want to call it, but this specific orientation that has seized a lot of the left, which improves no human life and only results in oppression, in my view, became a topic in your conversation with him. This is from last December 2021.
Yeah.
And I want to play a clip from it because I think his summary of this is really striking. Here's Elon Musk, Babylon Bee.
It is a prevalent mind virus and arguably one of the biggest threats to modern civilization. So do we want a humorless society that is simply rife with condemnation and hate, basically? At its heart, wokeness is divisive, exclusionary, and hateful. It basically gives mean people a reason. It gives them a shield to be mean and cruel, armored in false virtue.
Okay, I spend my whole life talking about wokeness, whatever that is, and normally we dismiss it as like annoying or silly. Arguably one of the biggest threats to modern civilization. It gives mean people a shield to be mean and cruel, armored in false virtue. I mean,
can't say it better than that.
Well, that's also not the kind of language or thinking you associate with a corporate CEO. Like, that's some pretty deep and true stuff. Like, what?
I know. Yeah.
I thought he's running like a rocket ship company, or like, you know what I mean? Like, why is he thinking about this stuff?
I mean, he sees it as the threat that it is. I think he's a reasonable guy, you know, and he understands that you know, what's really happening, all this virtue signaling, all these people that sanctimoniously are condemning other people with different views and opinions, rather than simply disagreeing with them or trying to refute them, they ridicule and attack them and try to get them deplatformed and canceled. I mean, that goes nowhere good fast. He sees that as being a threat to society itself. And I think he's
to
absolutely right about that.
civilization. I mean, it's just so interesting. The rest of us think it's like, my least favorite phrase of all time is snowflake. Oh, they're just snowflakes. They can't handle criticism. No.
Right.
They're not in a defensive crouch. They're in an offensive pounce.
It's power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These people are aggressive.
Right.
And they, it's passive aggression, but it's still aggression. And he gets that. I
Right.
just was amazed by that. But on the Babylon Bee, really? That's where he says it? The whole thing is so interesting to me.
It is interesting. But it is, I mean, that's a point worth really landing on, is the fact that this outrage, that he sees for what it is, it's feigned indignation. It's not real. It's manufactured, and it's manufactured for a purpose. If I can get real, if you offend me so much, I'm going to be so mad about how you offended me. I can get you to lose your job. Well, then you can't offend me anymore. Then you're not a threat to me anymore. I can take you out of the equation, and it's not a matter anymore of us just disagreeing respectfully, agreeing to disagree, or trying to refute each other. It's one side trying to use outrage as a weapon to bludgeon you into non-existence. And the fact that he sees that is great, because he's one of these people, he has the resources to actually do something about it. We're sitting here, we get knocked off Twitter, and it's like, well, we can complain about it on other platforms, but we can't do anything about it. Right. This guy's got hundreds of billions of dollars. He can actually do something about it. And so, I respect the fact that he's putting his money in there and saying, I want to buy Twitter. And he actually made an offer to buy the whole thing, to take it over, to try to say, hey, look, this is the de facto town square of the modern age. Free speech needs to flourish here, not be suppressed.
Well, yeah, and then the board turns him down and tries to prevent him from buying. His offer was above the sell number that J.P. Morgan had already given the stock. So, they have a fiduciary responsibility, very clear, to take that offer. They're refusing because that would mean free speech. Mm-hmm. It really tells you as clearly as anyone could tell you that the system is rigged. This is not on the level at all. This is not about market capitalism. They're not serving their shareholders.
Right.
They're serving somebody else. I think don't you think this is a fascinating thing to watch?
It is, and it exposes them too.
Yes.
I think a lot of people are seeing what's being done here is, it's not in the interest of the shareholders. It's in the interest of the powers that be that are wanting to protect their sacred cows and keep the content moderation in place. It's vitally important to them. The minute you let the speech flourish and you let the jokes flow, and I joked about this, when Elon Musk first made his offer, I said, pretty soon you might actually be able to make jokes and statements of facts on this platform. Like that might be coming, like that's an outrageous thing. Like it's not allowed right now. Jokes are allowed in certain contexts, but with certain targets, it's completely off limits. So I think something's got to give, and this is unexpected to me. When I was thinking about what the possible outcomes are here, there's a few possible outcomes. It's we never get back on. We're always off of Twitter, or Congress does something, or the courts do something. Maybe there will be a law that's passed that makes it unlawful for them to engage in viewpoint discrimination or something like that. Or common carrier doctrine could be applied to these platforms so that they're not legally. There's minimal regulation that's there that prevents them from discriminating. Those are possible solutions. I wasn't expecting an ultra wealthy individual to insert himself into this and say, if you guys aren't going to do something, I'm going to do something.
Deus ex machina. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like a theatrical device where all of a sudden the rich guy swoops in to save everybody.
Right. It's a weird timeline we're in.
Well, you hate to live in a system where you're reliant on some random rich guy to restore to you your God-given rights.
Right.
But I don't know what the other answer is. Do you?
I don't know. I mean, those other ones that I named are possibilities, but who knows when or if that will ever happen. I mean, imagine counting on Congress to do something in your best interest.
You've given up on that. That could be a headline.
If my future in business is contingent on Congress doing something in my best interest, I'm in trouble.
That's hilarious. So you're the CEO, so I don't expect you to answer fully, but is the business thriving? Is it working despite the censorship?
There is a sense in which these attacks, I've said this before, I've said it on your show, they do amplify our voice when they try to suppress it to some extent. Yeah. When something like this happens, and I'm talking to you and I'm making the media rounds, our traffic will spike. We'll get a lot of subscribers. We'll generate support. But that's like a punctuated spike, right? That's a one-time, there's a response. It lasts for 24 to 48 hours, however long that lasts. The media frenzy, we trend on Twitter for a little bit with people talking about us, not because we're tweeting there. And then that dies down and you remain banned from the platform. You lose a lot of traffic. You're sidelined from, a moment ago I quoted Musk, he called it the de facto town square. You're sidelined from the town square. I mean, your voice is no longer part of the dialogue. You're no longer getting retweeted by these large influential accounts. You're no longer a part of the discussion. You become less relevant. So there's a huge cost to that. So I think on the one hand, it helps us, it generates more attention. On the other hand, it does limit our reach. And so there is a weird tension there where it helps and hurts at the same time. And over the course of time, it remains to be seen whether or not long-term it does more harm than good.
But as of today, the spring of 2022, you're doing okay?
The business is successful. Yeah, we're profitable. We're growing. We're hiring right now. We're exploring opportunities in media where we might, we're exploring the possibility of creating a show, hiring a bunch of people, writers and producers, and maybe even partnering with a production company to do something like that. There's a lot of ideas on the table and a lot of things that we're looking at doing in terms of growing and expanding. So the business is doing great. Will it continue to do great if we get deplatformed and become irrelevant? That's, a big question. But what we are trying to do, and the left will try to criticize this as being a grift or whatever, but what we try to do is rally people to support us. We say, look, if you love our content, you value our content, get on our email list so we actually own your contact information and can stay in touch with you. We don't own our audience on Twitter. We don't own our audience on Facebook. We don't own it on YouTube. These are audiences that they can just take away from us. We've spent millions of dollars building them and countless hours building them, but we don't own them, right? So we need to own our audience. We need our supporters to support us directly. And they can do that by subscribing to us, by buying our merchandise, by sharing our headlines directly between people, by getting on our email list. There's a lot of ways to get involved with us directly if you value our content, because we certainly can't count on the social media platforms to be driving traffic to us forever.
Is there anything that you read that you don't produce that you think is funny? Are there outposts of comedy left other than Babylon Bee?
Oh, yeah. There's lots that I think are funny. I think there's still a lot of comedians out there who are doing great work. I mean, you have usually it's stuff that goes back to that idea of poking holes in the popular narrative. Dave Chappelle's special that was taking so much heat. I didn't think it was his funniest that he's ever done, but I do think what he was doing was bold in the sense that he's making jokes that you're not allowed to make anymore. Oh, yeah. And comedians need to do that. And by the way, when I give talks about this or I'm addressing these topics, I ask the audience, I'm like, do you think Dave Chappelle is winning or losing? I think he's winning. There's a sense in which he's winning because we're talking about him more. He's getting more streams on his special. He's in a unique situation because he already has a name. He already has a following. I think we're in a unique situation there too. If we were trying to get off the ground and this was happening to us, we'd be done. We'd be dead. It's once you have a following that they amplify your voice when they try to suppress it. So I think he's doing great stuff. There's other comedians out there like that are doing sketches. Like the one that comes to mind is Ryan Long. I don't know if you've heard of Ryan Long, but he did that the woke and the racist guy. One was wearing a shirt that said woke, the other was wearing a shirt that said racist, and they agreed with each other on absolutely everything. It was hysterical. It perfectly illustrated the absurdity of the woke position and how racist it actually is, because it makes everything about skin color and everything about gender. That was really good, and that's an example of a comedian who's poking holes in the popular narrative. Now, he might get deplatformed as well. I mean, that could be coming if he continues to make those jokes. But I think that there are, I try to encourage young people that there are opportunities right now. The comedians who are willing to say the things you're not supposed to say and speak the truths you're not supposed to speak, people are hungry for that. I think the Babylon Bee's success, I think the reason that we're thriving right now, in spite of the efforts to silence us, is because people are hungry for that. It's the reason why Chappelle's doing better than he was before he made those jokes. So if you're willing to take that risk and step into that arena and understand that when they attack you, it means you're doing something right and you're over the target. If you're willing to put yourself in that place, I think you'll do better than if you play it safe and try to tiptoe through the minefield of all the woke insanity.
Last question. I wonder, and I'm sure you've thought about this, but why do you think they get so hysterical in the face of any criticism or mockery. So I think the Babylon Bee is a big deal, but it's got a smaller market share than, say, Apple.
Right.
You're not exactly running America.
Right.
And you gently mock some dude who's posing as a female admiral. I mean, that's just inherently funny. I mean, come on. I'm an admiral. Okay. Settle down, son. You're not an admiral. Anyway, whatever. You make fun of that, but not in a vicious way or whatever. And that is such a threat to them that they have to shut you down? Like, what is that? Why are they that touchy?
Honestly, I think it all goes back to the truth of the joke. The underlying truth is the threat. It's not that, it's wrapped in the package of humor. I love this quote.
But they can't tolerate any of it.
No. I love this quote by G.K. Chesterton. He said that humor can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle.
Yeah.
It can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle. And I think that's true. It's kind of disarming, and that's what makes it so effective, and that's what makes it a threat. So it's the effectiveness that makes it a threat. And when you mock something, when you subject it to ridicule, you take away its power, you expose it for what it is, and you do it in a way that's much more effective, I think, than argument and serious refutation. Well, those are important. I think they're very important. I think comedy hits from a different angle that's a little bit more disarming. It slips in under the door underneath, past your defenses, and it makes you laugh at something that you were trying to take seriously. And that's very effective. And it's frightening to them how effective that is. And I think our success, how widely successful we've been, is threatening to them because they see that it is being effective. That's the evidence that we're being so effective. And so I think that's really ultimately what it comes down to.
It's just so funny. They spent, 50 years lionizing Lenny Bruce and, he's so subversive and we're for subversive and he's a junkie. It wasn't even funny, but whatever. They love Lenny Bruce. And then the second they get power, they're like, shut up, no jokes.
Right.
No more subversion. We're in charge now.
Yeah. And even their own comedians. Like if you look at the late night comedy right now, they're going for like affirmative applause, not amusement.
I know.
It's less about making the people laugh than it is about preaching some message and having them stand up and clap. And I think that's just such a weird place to be in, where comedy has turned into that.
I mean, it's fine if, whatever, the one guy, the three main guys, one of them doesn't want anything to do with politics, okay? And then one of them is just like a truly nasty person, an ideologue, and a tormented, unhappy guy. But Jimmy Kimmel was like a legit entertainer.
Yeah.
And to watch him sort of bow to the censors and become this like sad middle-aged husk, just grinding it out for the paycheck, it just kills me to see that.
But then you see Bill Maher, for example, talking about how destructive cancel culture is, wokeism, making everything about race and gender, and just saying, look, people should be free to say what they want and disagree, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a hater. It just means they have a different view than you. There are comedians who are stepping out and saying stuff like that, and I think that it's only going to do them favors, honestly. I really think that there's so many people who are so hungry for us to push back on this stuff.
It's totally true. And Maher turned out to be a little harder to control than the rest.
Yeah.
Seth Dillon, impossible to control, and I mean that as a high compliment. May you thrive and continue to amuse and enlighten, and we are rooting for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seth Dillon, CEO of Babylon Bee. Tucker Carlson, today's the name of the show. New episodes at least 3 times a week. More if we're feeling particularly industrious. We will see you every weeknight, 8 p.m. on the Fox News Channel.